Hi everyone, PV here, and welcome to today's YouTube video. In today's video, we're going to continue our set review of Innistrad Prince and Val, where we're going through every single card in this set and talking about its constructed application, right? Mostly standard and historic, but it's constructed applications and where I think they can be played, whether they're good or not, overrated, underrated, they have potential, and so on. In the two videos ago, we did white, and in the last video, we did blue. So in this video, we're going to go through every black card in the set, and keeping in mind that most cards in the set are not going to be good, so we're going to speed through those pretty quickly. We're just going to be like, hey, this is a limited card or whatever. And we're going to focus on the cards that truly have potential in my mind, that I think are particularly interesting. So if you've missed the previous two set reviews, white and blue, make sure to check it out. I will post the link on the description. Aim for the Head. I think this is just a limited card. The Go Blank is such a better discard spell in Cinder right now, so you're not going to play this. Archgoo of Thraben. This card is relatively interesting, but I think there are better versions of it that exist, right? Where if a zombie dies, you get to do something. Because this is a zombie dies and you get to draw half a card in the best of days, right? If you add up the fact that you're drawing some cards, and you're putting a card in the graveyard, if it's bad, it might get to better than half. But overall, I think you can find better versions of this effect elsewhere. Bleed Dry. I think this is just a limited removal spell as well. Blood Fountain. Yeah, I think this card is also kind of weak. And we can take a moment to talk about the blood tokens now. Right, the blood tokens are artifacts that you pay 1, tap, and discard a card and sack them to draw a card. So they basically loot for 1 mana, which can be quite good. They have diminishing returns, right? You don't want too many of them, I think, because they can be kind of clunky, right? Obviously, if you're looking for something specific, then you want many blood tokens until you find it. But the idea is that you don't spend your whole turn sacking blood tokens, right? You're just trying to, have a spare mana, you loot a card and try to find something. You make sure you don't flood out. You make sure you have mana to cast your spells. There's some synergy with blood tokens, but they are not very good synergies for the most part. So I think you look at blood tokens mostly as a bonus, right? You're getting this loot effect on top of whatever it is that your card would do, but you're unlikely to play a blood token deck. Now, there is one card that has some synergy that I think is worth mentioning. We'll see that. It's a black card. We'll see it later on. Bloodcrazed Socialite. I think pretty clearly a limited card. Blood Vial Purveyor. This one is quite interesting. It does have an errata already, right? It is until the end of the turn and not forever, which is what you'd expect. It is a 5/6 flying trample card for 4, which is, pretty strong. And then it has sort of a bonus and a negative. I think it's much more of a negative than a bonus, but in some games it's going to act as a bonus, because in some games your opponent we're just not having a mana to sack the tokens, and then this is going to grow even bigger. But the most likely scenario is you play the Purveyor, they play a card that kills it, and then they get a blood token on top of that. So they're looting on top of killing your creature, right? I think that is how it's going to play out most of the time. If they can't kill it, then, they might take 2 or 3 extra damage in a turn because they just don't have the time to sack those tokens. So it can be pretty good or bad depending on the situation. I think overall it's a slight negative, but it's not a very big negative, I don't think. The main problem with this card is a similar problem to what the white cards have on the 3-drop slot, is that every good vampire card in this set costs 4. So everything is costing 4. This is yet another 4-cost vampire. So we'll see later on at the end of this review that there are a lot of good 4-mana vampires, and we are not going to be able to play all of them, because 4 is a pretty expensive number. And I don't know if Blood Vial Purveyor makes it. It makes that cut, and it has to fight the other 4-drops. Cemetery Desecrator, my preview card. I think this card is reasonable, but it just strikes me as overall a little bit too weak, right? It's doing a lot of things, but the amalgamation of what it's doing does not add up to a 6-mana card in today's standard format. So 4 mana is not a good stat line. Then you get to exile something, but it's not that relevant that you do. Then you maybe kill a creature, maybe kill a planeswalker. You can do some fancy things like resetting your sagas and stuff like that. But overall, and then when it dies, you do it all over again, right? But overall, I think you're just not getting enough. If If this was, always kill a creature, always kill a planeswalker, then maybe. But the fact is that sometimes you're going to play this and you won't even be able to kill what you want. And that's pretty awkward. So I don't think this is going to be good enough. But it might be a one-off to door target, the way Noxious Gearhulk was. Courier Bat, clearly limited card, I think. Demonic Bargain. I don't see why you would play this right now, but it's an interesting card to know that it exists, right? This, there are historic decks, the Tainted Pack decks, they played stuff like Green Tutor, right? And this is sort of another Green Tutor, except it's pretty dangerous to play in your Tainted Pack deck, because you could just exile the card you're looking for. If you have 4-offs, then I think you're really unlikely to exile. It's really safe, right? It's like less than 1%, I think, that you exile all your 4 cards, so you're good to go here. It's a pretty low number. I don't know what it is exactly. But if you have 2-offs that you're searching for, then it becomes a bit iffier. So I don't think this will see play anywhere. But it's mostly because people aren't interested in tutors, not because it exiles. And the one deck that is interested in tutors is the one deck in the format that cannot afford the exile effect, ironically. Diregraph Scavenger, I think limited card. Doom Dissenter, limited card as well. Dread Fugue. This card is good, I think. The problem is that, we compare it with Inquisition of Kozilek, and 3 mana is a lot more than 2 mana, right? The people have a lot of 3-drops in their decks. They don't have that many 2-drops a lot of the time. And sometimes they only have 1, and you draw this on turn 2, or you can't play it on turn 1 because you have a tap land, and it just doesn't do anything, right? So I think overall this is worse than Inquisition. It's significantly worse for 1 mana. But you might still want to play it in other formats, right? If you have Thoughtseize and Inquisition, you're probably playing those too. But in Historic, for example, you have Thoughtseize but no Inquisition, and this might be better than the rest, I guess. Or you might be playing Standard, and in Standard you don't even have Thoughtseize, right? So this can see play. The problem is that in Standard there are some decks that don't even have any 2s or have very few 2s. So against those, you're just playing Coercion, right? You're playing this for 3 mana. If you compare this with Pelakka Predation, I think it's better than Pelakka Predation. So I think this will almost certainly see play. I think the effect is powerful enough that it's play. It does get hurt by the fact that a lot of the cards that people normally play on turn 2 cost more than 2 mana, right? For example, you can't take the Foretell cards with it, right? Auron's Epiphany, that's a normal turn 2 play, like Demon Boat. You can't take those, right? Saw it coming. So it does hurt a little bit. But I think this card is good. I think this card will see play. Dreadfeast Demon. And every time I read this card, I read Breakfast Demon. But, yeah, I think this is a limited card. I don't think this is good enough. Dying to Serve. This is another one of those cards that just gets you because you read the effect, you're so excited, you're like, oh my god, this is so great. And then it says disability triggers only once a turn, and you're like, oh, they really had me in the first half. I wish they would just put that on as a first thing, so you temper your expectations. As it is, I mean, it can still be reasonable, especially because it can trigger on your turn and on their turn, right? So imagine, for example, you play, on turn 2, you play that discard outlet, the white discard outlet, right? That you can discard a card. The 3/1 Spirit, you can discard a card to exile it until the end of the turn. And then turn 3, you play Dying to Serve. Then you can discard a card already and make a token. And on their turn, you can discard a card and make a token. And if you're gaining something as you're discarding these cards, then maybe that's good enough, right? So I think this card is cool. I'm not going to rule this card out. It is potentially powerful, but I don't see where I would play it right now, right? It's definitely not going to slot into any existing deck, but it could actually create a new deck. Edgar's Awakening, reasonable card, but we've seen it before. It's just not that strong, right? We haven't seen exactly this, but we've seen similar things before. Falkenrath Forebear. This card is cool. It is, obviously a only go in type of card, right? It doesn't block. But I think it's pretty good versus a deck that is trying to grind you out. Because, it's pretty hard to kill, right? You're gonna, I assume you're gonna have some other sources of blood tokens. So you get to just bring it back. And it's a pretty good card to discard to a blood token, right? So imagine you have 3 blood tokens in play. You can use one, discard this, draw a card, and then sack the other 2 to bring it back, right? So it is a card that works super well with blood tokens. And then obviously it replenishes itself as it's dealing them damage. It does match up poorly versus Auron's Epiphany, but it is a pretty reasonable aggressive vampire that I think can see some play. It's a healthy mix of aggression and staying power, right? But the thing is that it just really works very well with the bullet tokens, both in all ways, right? So there's a deck that's more focused on bullet tokens. This card would probably be good in it. Fell Stinger. I love this card. I think this card is much better than it looks. Because it looks like a limited card, but I think it's actually good and constructed. Because black is the card that has the easiest time, the color that has the easiest time producing bodies that you don't mind sacrificing, right? Because you have the decay tokens, you have Eye Tweet, you have Shambling Ghast, you have stuff like Jadar that makes a token every turn. So it's very easy to exploit something, not only for free, but sometimes at a value. And then this becomes 3 mana, 3/2 Death Touch. When it enters play, draw 2. Right, and that's a pretty good deal. And you can even nuke your opponent if they are, if they are low in life. You can just sacrifice something and deal 2 damage to them. So I think this card can see play. I think this card is good. Gift of Fangs. This card is also kind of exciting because Deadweight is a playable card, and if you have your own vampires, this is a much better Deadweight, right? Because a problem with playing removal spells like Deadweight is that sometimes they are just Deadweight. Right, your opponent does not play any creatures, then what do you do with them? And this becomes a pump spell if they don't have any creatures. And +2/+2 for 1 mana is okay, right? So if you have vampires yourself, then this card can be quite good. Obviously, if everyone else is playing vampires, then it's no longer a removal spell, so it is metagame dependent. But in a scenario where you're the only person playing vampires and other people have different creature types, then I think this card can actually see play. Glutinous Guest, I think this is just a limited card. Graph Reaver. This card is a bit underpowered, I think, which is kind of sad. Green is getting 2 mana, 3/3, no drawback, 2 relevant abilities, and this is a 2 mana, 3/3 with a drawback, and it's kind of like, you taking a damage every turn is pretty big, right? In 4 turns, you've taken 4 damage. That's a lot. It is a reasonable curve with Champion of the Perished, right? So it's a 1-2 punch. But I think for this to be good, people have to be playing Planeswalkers, and they currently are not. If they are playing Planeswalkers, then this can be very good. Right? Imagine your opponent, plays a Planeswalker, and then you get to play this and sack something and kill it immediately, and you keep your 3/3. You can even sack itself if you're low on life. So I think then it can be good. But overall, it's not a super powerful card, and the metagame right now is not very well set up for it. So if there is a Zombies deck, and his deck is interested in just being as aggressive as possible, then this is probably going to play just by virtue of being a 2 mana 3/3. But it would require a much more Planeswalker heavy metagame for this to be considered a good card. Grizzly Ritual, a pretty expensive limited card. Groom's Finery, also limited. Reles Rider. This one is cool. This is the card that I was talking about when I said there are better versions of this effect later in the set, right? Because, you're getting a 3/1, and then if it dies, you get a 2/2. That's okay. And if your other stuff dies, you also get a 2/2. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with tokens, right? And the Archghoul of Thraben does work with tokens. That's the thing it has going for it. But I think getting a 2/2 is overall better than looking at a top card, and if it's a zombie, you draw it. So I would be more inclined to play Headless Rider. But if a lot of your zombies are decay tokens, or just tokens in general, right? Not necessarily decay tokens, then the Archghoul of Thraben is going to be better than the Headless Rider. And also the Archghoul is a 3/2 and not a 3/1. It doesn't die to Spikefield Hazard. So it actually might be better than I'm thinking. I'm kind of going back on the goal here, but I think they're both going to fight for the same slot, give or take. And the Headless Rider is usually going to be better, but maybe the goal will end up being better than I think. Hero's Downfall. This card used to be pretty good. Nowadays, people aren't playing that many Planeswalkers, so I don't think it's worth just paying an extra mana to be able to kill a Planeswalker, especially another black mana. Alright, maybe you want some number of this in a heavy black deck, but this is not... Like, it used to be that you played black for Hero's Downfall, right? You're not going to do that now. This card is much worse, because we're not, again, in a Planeswalker-centric metagame. My Lich Goal. I think... This is just too... Like, you have to be getting a lot of value from the exploit, right? Because what you're getting is a Ravenous Wrath that's a 2/2, right? That's really not good. I mean, it is good, but it's really not worth sacrificing a creature. So you have to be getting it has to be very trivial for you to sacrifice something or a benefit, right? And I think right now it is relatively trivial and sometimes even a benefit, but this effect is just too weak when you don't get there, right? I think you have to get there 100% of the time for this card to be okay. And like, you're not going to want to sacrifice anything remotely good to this, because if you don't have something that is trivial to sacrifice, like, you know, if you don't have a Decay token or a Night Witch or a Shambling Ghast, you're just going to end up sacrificing itself because it's going to be the worst card that you have in play, at which point it's a 2 mana, they discard a card, which is just a joke of a card, right? Parasitic Grasp. If there are a lot of humans, this card is quite good. I think, like, for 2 mana, you get a Lightning Helix on humans, and that's pretty powerful. A lot of decks do play a human because they play Faceless Haven, right? So even decks that might not have many humans will have 1 human. And it's important that the wolf, the 3/3 wolf, is also a human, unless they pay 4. Then it stops being a human. And of course, if a lot of the white creatures are humans, and if they are playing a different color, you just pay 3 mana, right, to kill the thing. The problem is that, it doesn't even kill everything, and I don't know what deck would really want this. Maybe the blue-black decks do want it. Like if you play Lear, for example, then it's a good way of getting some life after it's resolved, so you really run away with the game, and the game becomes unlosable. But I'm not sure it's better than just a removal spell. Like, you feel really stupid if you play this and your opponent just plays an Adeline or a Troll that's a 4/4, right? And you can't kill it. So if we don't have burn decks in the format right now, right? We don't have mono red. So gaining life is not that important in this format right now, which makes this card a little bit worse. Path of Peril. I like this card. If for 3 mana you get to queue every token, or a lot of the small things from mono white, and then for 6 you get to kill everything. 6 is pretty expensive to kill everything. So I'm not sure where I would play this. I think if you're interested in this effect, you're mostly just wanting to play a regular Wrath, right? Because that's just going to be cheaper, and way cheaper if it's Doomscar. But there might be decks that are specifically interested in killing the creatures with mana value 2 or less, like specifically want the front side of Path of Peril, then it can be good. I can't think of many decks right now where this would be true, but I think it's something that could be true. Persistent Specimen, we've seen it before. Pointed Discussion. I don't think you're getting enough to play this with your token. The Roll Tide Gargantua, limited card. Skulking Killer, limited card. Soaring the Mirthless. I think Soaring is not very good. You do get to draw cards. So if you're playing versus a control deck, it's mostly going to be draw an extra card per turn. But I think the play pattern with Soaring is just that it's going to be 4 mana, you make a 2/3 Flying Life token. The next turn you draw a card. The next turn you make another token maybe, or you just continue drawing cards. But if you compare it to like Loth, or whatever, however you spell that, it's so much weaker. Even though it costs only 4 instead of 5, I think you're just much better off playing the Lothula card. So I'm not sure where you're playing this. It might be good enough in the Blood into the Snow decks just because it costs 4. So at least, it might curve into Loth. Like, if you have this plus Lothla, is better than having 2 Lothlas. And it's something to return with Blood into the Snow as well, right? So and those decks really want card drawing. So I think it can see play in those. It's not an unplayable card by any means. It's just not very good, right? I don't think you want to play this in Vampires because I think, again, a lot of the Vampires cost 4. And this is not one of the good ones. But it is a card that will potentially see play in the mono black Snow decks. Toxrill the Corrosive, I think this is basically an EDH card. It's just so expensive, and it doesn't have any interplay effect, so you're not going to play that in Constricted. Undead Butler. I think this is probably too expensive, but... sorry, not too expensive, too weak as a 1/2. You do get to mill 3 cards if you're into that, if you're getting value from that, it can be reasonable, but I don't think it's good enough. Undying Malice, we've seen this card before. Right, I would rather play the one that is a model double face card that gets to be played as a land, I think. So it's probably not going to see any play. Unhallowed Phalanx, this is just 1 in 13 is a limited card, obviously, for the toughness synergies. Vampire's Kiss, I don't think I'm interested in this burn spell, but I mean, it is a pretty low number, right? 2 and 2 is not that much damage. You do get 2 blood tokens, not 1. So if there's enough synergy with blood tokens, it might get there, but I don't think right now there is. And Wedding Security. Yeah, I think this is, again, just a limited card. So the flip cards, they're outside the alphabetical order at the WotC website, so I'm just doing them at the end. Bloodsworn Squire, clearly limited card, I think. Catapult Father, limited card. Concealing Curtains, I think this card is quite good. For 1 mana, you get a reasonable blocker, 0-4 defenders, the same thing as Moldering Egg. And then once you get to 3 mana, you get a 3-4 menace, which is a respectable body, and you take away their best card. Well, you do give them something in return, but if you've played with cards like Vendetta and Click, you know that this is not that big a deal. Right? Especially if you're taking their curve early on. For example, if you play and flip this, and they have only 1 3-mana card, and you take that away, if they draw a good 4-mana card, it doesn't matter. Like, they would much rather have a 3-mana card, because now they have a bunch of 4-mana cards, and they're going to skip their turn 3. So I think this card is quite good. I don't know exactly where I would play it, but I think it has the potential to replace the black 1-drops in the black control deck. Right now, the black control deck is very creature token sacrificey centric. Right, it has Trembling Gas, Eye Twitch, Deadly Dispute, Skullport Merchant, and cards like that, which are good synergy but not individually very powerful. And Concealing Curtains is a pretty powerful card that also acts as this early, road blocker for cheap creatures. So I think it has the potential to be played in that deck instead of the 1-drops we currently have. And if there's a good black aggro deck, it can also see play, right? It's good to play this on turn 1 and flip on turn 3 and already attack. Desperate Farmer, clearly limited card. Enrica Damnati. I think this card is tricky to evaluate because it does a bunch of very different things. I think it might be better than it looks, but worse than people who think it's good think it is. If that makes any sense. Because in reality, it's a 4-mana, 3-4 flying lifelink Death Touch that pumps your other creatures in itself, right? And that can be quite good in a racing situation. And if you're getting bonuses, that can be very strong, right? Imagine your opponent just has 1 creature in play. They have a Goldspan Dragon. You just play Enrica Damnati, you sacrifice your bad 1-drop, you kill their dragon. Next turn, you flip it and attack. Right? Or they have nothing in play. You draw a card, it replaces itself, and then next turn it's attacking. Right? Because it happens at the beginning of combat, it's almost an interest play trigger, right? They can deal with it, they can kill it, but they need an instant speed card to do that. So you're usually gonna get something out of it. The problem is that, again, it's a 4-drop vampire. We've seen a lot of those already. There are more to come. And that's a pretty popular slot. So I don't know if this has what it takes as a 4-drop vampire, but it might be the best of them in a different deck, right? It might just be good in the Eye Twitch deck that we were talking about because sacrificing your creature is so free. But it really is the kind of card that I think you have to play with to evaluate. It might play out much better or much worse than it seems because it just does so many different things. So I want to play with this to see how good it is. Malicious Invader, I think just limited card. Ragged Recluse. It is not hard to discard a card nowadays because of blood tokens. So if you're really into that, you get to do it. But your payoff is not that big. And the downside when it doesn't work is pretty big, right? If it doesn't work, you're getting a 2-1-4-2, which is bad. If it does work, you're getting effectively a 4-3 with 1 life. But the problem is that a lot of the time, even if you do have a way to discard a card, like you do have a blood token, you don't want to use it, right? You don't want to use it that turn, which means that this is going to take a while to get going. So overall, I think not good enough. Blood-Soaked Reveler. I think if you have reasonable ways of gaining life and triggering this over and over, it can be okay. It's just that flipping this doesn't even do that much, right? It just flips into a 3-3 with a relatively bad ability, so I'm pretty skeptical. Voldaren Bloodcaster. I think this has potential, because the Vampire's deck already wanted a 2-drop, right? And it's a 2-mana 2-1 flying vampire, which is not great, but is okay. Right, with 2 relevant abilities, right, so to speak. So when it dies, you get a blood token, but when other vampires die, or any creature actually, you get a blood token as well. And then once you have 5, it turns into an actually good card, right? Because it becomes a 3-3 flyer that immediately turns a blood token into a 2-2 flying bat that can immediately attack, right? So if you flip this, you get to attack for 5 that turn. I think that's pretty good for a 2-drop. So black in this set is kind of interesting because I feel like there are 3 potential spots for black cards here. All right, there's the mono black control deck that might want the Concealing Curtains, that might want Sorin, that might want, 1 or 2 Heroes Downfalls maybe, but probably not. That might want the Enrica Domnati. So this deck could have gotten some upgrades. Then there's Vampires. And you might want the Voldaren Bloodcaster. You might want the 5/6 Vampire. And you might want some of the gold cards that we're going to see later. And then there's just Zombies deck. And, again, you might want the 2-mana 3/3, right? Or you might want the Scorpion. I think the Scorpion is actually quite good. So I think there are a lot of potential additions. Oh, the Zombies deck might also want Headless Rider or Archghoul of Thrabman. So there are a bunch of potential additions to black decks. They don't all go together. You mostly have to choose what you want to dedicate to. Are you trying to be more blood tokens or more vampires or more zombies or a mix of 2 but not 3 or more control or aggro but no types? So there are a bunch of possibilities for black decks. It's not clear to me which one of those is the best, or if any of those is even very good, right? But I think there are a bunch of different things to try with the black cards in this set. If I had to guess which card is going to be the best, it is probably, I would probably go with Revealing Curtains as the potential best black card. But I think there are plenty others that can see play. The Discard spell can see play as well. So a bunch of interesting cards in black that I'm not really sure of the power level of. If you like my work and want to support me a little bit more, make sure to check out my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/PVDDR, and there you can support my work and get some extra perks on top of it, such as access to an exclusive Discord server where you can ask questions, talk to me, vote on topics for the next videos, and stuff like that. And special thank you for my biggest supporters. Adam Renzi, Adam Camilleri, Clicks, Foxy, Fernando Vizeu, John Jam, Jack Hart, Joey, Calvin Peng, Kevin Massey, Lawson, Mattia Giardini, Nate, Safa Rappin, Sylvia Letizia, Stu Cameron, Thomas Pokorny, Dimitri, and Willie Linton. I really appreciate the support, and I'll see you next video.